Good morning and welcome to the webinar on Disability 101, Disability Inclusion and the Americans with Disabilities Act, Essential Building Blocks. I'm Sean Lyons, Executive Director of the South Dakota Retailers Association. 2 years ago, Governor Dennis Dugard established an Employment Works Task Force to bring the private and public sectors together to study the issue of employment problems and opportunities for people with disabilities. During that process, our association expressed our commitment to help improve competitive employment opportunities for people with disabilities while simultaneously meeting the needs of employers. As part of that ongoing effort, we are pleased to partner with the South Dakota Department of Human Services to present this webinar. Today's program will feature presentations by Stewart and Kimberly Hoberg. Kimberly is a business specialist with the South Dakota Division of Rehabilitation Services. She has a Master's of Science degree in Rehabilitation Counseling and is also a certified rehabilitation counselor. Kimberly is a primary contact for South Dakota employers and businesses, providing technical support in the areas of hiring people with disabilities, reasonable accommodations, business tax incentives, Section 503 regulations, and other areas of disability-related topics. Stewart is the Rehabilitation Engineer for the Division of Rehabilitation Services, a position he has held for 26 years. Steve works with rehabilitation counselors and people with disabilities to help people obtain or maintain employment and improve independent living through the provision of assistance technology devices and services. His duties also include provision of technical assistance regarding Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act and the Americans with Disabilities Act. In addition, he works at the State Technology Program, SSA cost reimbursement, Ticket to Work, and the Telecommunications Equipment Distribution and Telecommunications Adaptive Device Programs. 2 notes before we start. The phones of all attendees are muted so that we won't be hearing background noises. We will have a question and answer period at the conclusion of the presentation. If you would like to ask a question at any time, just go to the panel on the right side of your screen where it says type message here. Type your question, then click on submit. At the conclusion of the presentation, I'll read the questions out loud and one of our presenters will provide the answers. We'll now turn the presentation over to Kimberly Hoberg and Stewart. Kimberly and Steve, good morning and thank you so much for presenting.
Good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure to be presenting to you this morning, and we hope you enjoy the webinar. Again, before we get started, it is just asked to email your questions as just instructed, and also reference the slide number to your question as well. Now, just to kind of start off with the webinar, with just providing everyone with a defining what a disability is. A disability can be defined by meeting one or more of the following categories or 3 prongs. People who have a physical or mental impairment, substantially limiting one or major life activity, or who have a record of such an impairment, or who are regarded as having an impairment. Now, I would just like to go back and just provide a clear definition of a major life activity. A major life activity was originally defined as caring for oneself, performing manual tasks such as walking, seeing, hearing, speaking, breathing, learning, or working. However, since then, the ADA amendments of 2008 expanded this definition, and later on in the webinar, Steve will address them in greater detail. Now, there are different components of disability, and I've got these broken down into different categories. So I would just like to provide you with some of the different categories along with some examples of which disabilities fall into the category. The first one is orthopedic. Now, some examples of disabilities that fall in this category consist of back injuries, arthritis, spinal cord injuries, or etc. So the next one is hearing, and some disabilities that fall within this category, hearing loss or deafness. The third category consists of vision. Disabilities that fall within this category consist of blindness, significant progressive or uncorrectable vision loss, and also etc. The fourth category is neurological. Some disabilities that fall within this category consist of epilepsy, traumatic brain injury, strokes, cognitive and or learning disabilities. The fifth one consists of cardiac or circulatory diagnoses. Some disabilities that fall within this category consist of congenital or degenerative heart diseases, leukemia, and other diagnoses. The next category is respiratory. Some disabilities that fall within this category consist of emphysema, asthma, chronic bronchitis, cystic fibrosis, etc. The next category, metabolic, nutritional, digestive, and cancers. Some of the common diagnoses that fall within these categories consist of diabetes, Crohn's disease, and the last category is psychological and emotional diagnoses. Some diagnoses that would fall within this category consist of depressive disorder, attention deficit disorder, or attention deficit hypertension disorder, or hyperactivity disorder, excuse me, and anxiety disorders. Now I'd like to kind of share with everyone a statistic back from 2012 to give everyone an idea of the differences among the employment rate of people with disabilities and people without disabilities in our state. According to the 2012 Annual Community Report obtained from Cornell University, the employment rate of people with disabilities in South Dakota was 54.1% in comparison to the rate of people without disabilities being 83.6%. That just kind of gives everyone an idea of how people with disabilities is an untapped labor. Now moving on to the next slide. Disabilities can occur either at birth or be acquired later on in life. And disabilities can also be apparent or non-apparent, meaning apparent, visible to the eye, or non-apparent can be in the form of a hidden disability. In fact, here are some other prevailing statistics. There are about 54 million individuals that have disabilities in America. About 82% of all disabilities are acquired and can occur as a result of some of the following factors: age, illnesses, accidents, or warfare. Now, diversifying your workplace. Traditionally speaking, America's workplace culture has been impacted by race and gender. However, in recent years, this has expanded to other attributes, including disability. The diversity of disability crosses among all racial, gender, education, and socioeconomic dimensions. Now, to give businesses and employers an idea of what are the benefits of employing people with disabilities, it's not about doing the right thing, but about bringing the bottom line of making business successful. And some of the benefits, I've got it broken down, and I would like to go over that in greater detail. Return on investment, human capital, diversity, marketing, innovation, and social responsibility. I would like to go back up to the first one, return on investment, and just give an overview of how that is a benefit to businesses. You know, hiring and retaining workers with disabilities decreases recruiting and turnover costs while enhancing morale and revenue. Workers with disabilities improve productivity through innovation, creativity, and tools, accommodations in which may benefit all employees. Employing diverse workers opens access to new markets and business opportunities. And lastly, inclusive work environments increase retention and reduce hiring and training costs. Now the next category, human capital. You know, people with disabilities, they represent 20% of the U.S. population. And again, they just embody a diverse labor pool. For effective human capital strategies, it is highly encouraged for businesses to do the following: develop or implement management strategies to attract and retain qualified talent, access recruitment and resources that serve job seekers with disabilities, develop approaches to retain the skills and knowledge of employees who acquire disabilities, and leverage cost-effective technology, tools, and resources to increase productivity and performance. Moving on to the third benefit, consisting of diversity. Creating a diverse workforce enhances competitiveness and contributes to positive images of businesses. By having effective diversity management, it allows for companies to survive and grow under complex and competitive business conditions. Competitiveness is achieved through diversity of thoughts, innovation, and creativity. Moving on to the fourth benefit of marketing. The disability community represents $200 billion in annual buying power, in which is further augmented by their family members and customers. Businesses can expand of accessing this market by some of the following strategies: hire people with disabilities, ensuring products and services are accessible and usable by a broad spectrum of disabilities, include people with disabilities in advertisement and other marketing materials, and utilize current employees with disabilities to assist with responding to marketing materials. Moving on to the next benefit of innovation. Employees with disabilities can also bring unique experiences and understanding that transform a workplace, enhance products and/or services, and increase overall productivity, and bring innovation and stimulate new product development through disability-inclusive, diverse teams. And the last benefit is social responsibility. Research has shown that companies demonstrating social responsibility are more competitive because they attract more employees and customers. This concept means that companies take more of a voluntary approach by integrating ethical and environmental concerns together with the measures of revenue, profit, and legal obligation. Now, many of you may be wondering, who can you contact in the state of South Dakota to learn more about hiring people with disabilities, or sharing job openings that your company may have to expand to including people with disabilities? And I will provide you with a number of agencies, and this is not limited to just these agencies. But the first one is South Dakota Vocational Rehabilitation, or VR. And the website link is to access the VR website directly. Now, South Dakota VR is a program providing individualized employment-related services to South Dakotans with disabilities to prepare for employment, achieve economic self-sufficiency, and full inclusion into society. The next one, South Dakota Services to the Blind and Visually Impaired, or SBVI, is a partner agency of VR in which they provide individualized rehabilitation services resulting in optimal employment and independent living outcomes for citizens who are blind or visually impaired in South Dakota. The next one, the American Indian VR program. There are a total of 4 office locations available in South Dakota, and they also provide VR services to American Indians with disabilities who reside on or near federal or state reservations and who are a member of state or federal tribe. And again, the website link provides further contact information for the 4 office locations available in South Dakota. The next one, the Department of Veterans Affairs, the VA VR program, is providing appropriate training or education to service-connected veterans, enabling them to overcome employment-related impediments which may be caused by their disability. There's 2 locations available in South Dakota, and one is in Sioux Falls, and the best way, if you are interested in reaching out to them, their office phone number is located on the slide, and the other one is in Rapid City, and also their phone number is on the slide as well. Now, the next one is South Dakota Division of Developmental Disabilities. Includes Community Support Program. The Division of Developmental Disabilities, or DDD for short, has funding, certification, and monitoring responsibilities for 19 nonprofit community agencies located throughout South Dakota, serving people with developmental disabilities. These agencies, which are certified by DD, are commonly referred to as community support providers, or CSP. They offer a spectrum of services related to community, residential, and vocational to South Dakotans with developmental disabilities. Now, Dakota Link is our South Dakota State Assisted Technology program, and they provide just support in terms of assistive technology, and that can be defined as anything that can be purchased, made at home, or modified to improve a person's day-to-day functioning. Now, in South Dakota, there are 2 business-led models or organizations employers may go to regarding assistance and support in regards to employing people with disabilities, in which are actually led by business leaders. There's one located in Sioux Falls, and that is called the Business Resource Network, or the BRN. Their mission statement consists of working to enhance and improve the employment climate in the Sioux Falls area by promoting the advantages of hiring people with disabilities, educating the employers and the public, and by fostering an environment that will assist businesses improving their production and efficiency. The executive director for the BRN is Julie Briggs. And the second one is located in the Rapid City area, and that is called the Workforce Diversity Network of the Black Hills, or WDNBH for short. And that is, again, available in Rapid City and consists of a team of business and human resource individuals serving as a link between employers and individuals who have the desire and qualifications to work. The executive director for WDNBH is Catherine Gressis. And again, to learn more information about these various programs, please feel free to just select the website link that's been provided on the PowerPoint, or please feel free to contact Steve, Stewart, or myself. Now, there's actually business tax incentives that are available to employers in terms of hiring people with disability. There's actually 3 of them. The first one is called the Architectural Transportation Tax Deduction. All businesses are eligible for this annual deduction related to expenses for removing physical, structural, and transportation barriers for people with disabilities. The IRS allows for a deduction of up to $15,000 per year for qualified architectural or transportation barrier removal expenses. This can be used for a variety of costs to make a facility or public transportation vehicle owned or leased for use in the business more accessible to and usable by persons with disabilities. Here are some examples: providing accessible parking spaces, ramps, or curb cuts, provide telephone, water fountains, and restrooms that are accessible to persons using wheelchairs, making walkways at least 40 inches wide, and or providing accessible entrances to buildings, including the stairs and the floors. Now, expenses that are not covered may not be used for expenses related to new construction, complete renovation being done to a facility or public transportation vehicle, or normal replacement of depreciable property. Now, the second business tax incentive is called the Small Business Tax Credit. It's an annual tax credit to assist with making businesses accessible to persons with disabilities. The credit is 50% of expenses over $250, but not exceeding $10,250 for a maximum benefit of $5,000. This is eligible to businesses that are in the previous year earned $1 million or less in gross receipt or had 30 or fewer full-time employees. Here are some examples of expenses that are covered within this tax incentive: sign language interpreters for employees or customers who have hearing impairment, readers for employees or customers with visual impairment, the purchase of adaptive equipment or the modification of equipment, printed materials in alternate formats such as braille, audio tape, or large print, the removal of architectural barriers in buildings or vehicles, or similar services such as the utilization of a job coach or coworker to provide support to an employee with disability. Now, I would like to give you an example of how this tax incentive has been used. Company A hired an individual with disability. A coworker was assigned to support the new employee as a workplace accommodation. The coworker spent a total of 1 hour per day providing support. The number of coworker hours spent with the employee totaled 200 hours during the calendar year. The coworker's hourly wage was $10 per hour. Therefore, the cost of providing the reasonable accommodation for the new employee with a disability was $2,000. The amount by which $2,000 exceeds $250 is the difference of $1,750. Now, 50% of that is $875. Company X may take a tax credit for $875 on its next income tax return. Now, moving on to the third business tax incentive, called the Work Opportunity Tax Credit, or WOTC, is a federal income tax credit available to employers that hire individuals from certain targeted groups, for example, people with disabilities, who encounter higher rates of employment due to various employment barriers. To take this a step further, employers may take up to a tax credit of 40% of the first $6,000 during the first year per each qualifying employee. Maximum credit per employee is $2,400 per tax year. The credit applies to employees who have at least worked 400 hours per year. However, partial credit of 25% for qualifying employees who work at least 120 hours and less than 400 hours per year may be claimed by employers. Now, this is overseen by the Department of Labor and Regulation. And for further details, you can either consult with your local Department of Labor and Regulation office or contact Peggy Carrico, who is actually the state WOTC coordinator. She's located in Aberdeen, and her phone number and email address is provided here on the slide. And just on a last note here before I turn it over to Stewart, is these tax incentives, you know, it is highly encouraged that you consult with your accountant or with the IRS to see if your business will qualify for these tax incentives.
Okay, hello. This is Steve Stewart, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the Americans with Disabilities Act. As it says on the slide, it's all about providing equal access and equal opportunity, and it is civil rights legislation. This is our icon that we came up with. The Department of Human Services just went through updating our ADA self-evaluation and transition plan, and as part of that we came up with this icon that has a little bit more action-oriented disability symbol, which we think represents people with disabilities in a little bit more positively. Basically, just go through a quick ADA timeline. We just celebrated the 25th anniversary of the ADA last month on July 26th. So it's been around a long time. Was signed into law in 1990, and the employment provisions in 94 for employers with 15 or more employees. But South Dakota law basically covers all employees, even those with less than 15. There were some Supreme Court decisions that really narrowed the protections of the ADA, and that's why the 2008 Amendments Act came about. Kim had referred to that earlier, and one of the main changes in that was changing the definition of disability. And the main thing they changed was that major life activity. Kim went through the main ones, the walking, seeing, hearing, speaking, etc. But the Amendments Act added eating, sleeping, sitting, standing, lifting, reading, bending, respiratory, circulatory, and reproductive functions. And it also added a bunch of major body functions such as the digestive, bowel, bladder, neurological, respiratory, circulatory, and reproductive functions. So you can see there's a lot of things that were added that really increases the amount of people that could qualify as a person with a disability. They also specified that it includes any impairment that is episodic or in remission, you know, if it would substantially limit a major life activity if it were active. And it clarified that even though a disability is controlled by medications, it is still covered by the ADA. Examples of that are epilepsy or diabetes. Now I just want to go through a couple ADA components that you're probably most likely to have to deal with at one time or another. And the main one is the effective communication. This is where you might need to provide a sign language interpreter or provide materials in alternative formats. And this could be required, you know, for your application process or during interviews, during employee training or orientation, or just as a job accommodation for an employee. I put our icon and web address on here that goes to our ADA policies. One of those is our effective communication policy that you could look at just as an example of you know, how that's done and what it covers. And the other one I listed on here is, you know, people that don't speak English as a first language. It's not an ADA issue, but it's probably something that a lot of you will at one time or another have to deal with. One of the resources that we use is this Google Translate. It's quite an amazing program. Basically, you just type on one side, you know, what you want to say, and then you choose a language. I think this has like 82 different languages listed, and then you click translate and it'll spell it right out in that other language. There's even a speak button that you can click on, and it'll read it in that language to you. So it's a pretty powerful program. There's a lot of similar things out there that you can use to communicate with people who are deaf or hard of hearing. Works a lot better than trying to pass hand notes back and forth. The other one is service animals. Title II and Title III of the ADA have a pretty strict definition of what a service animal is, and it clearly says that emotional support or comfort animals are not covered by the ADA. But they are covered by the Fair Housing Act. Somebody could be allowed to have a cat or a dog in their apartment, and they would have to allow that. But the Equal Employment Opportunities Commission, the EEOC, that covers the employment, they don't have any definition of service animal or comfort animal. It's a lot broader, and so therefore would probably be something that you would have to allow as a reasonable accommodation for an employee. And again, I've got our icon and web address that has our service animal policy you can look at as an example. Now I just want to quickly go over some of the job advertisements, notices, application interview, and then get into some questions that you should and shouldn't ask at during these processes. And the main thing you have to remember is all these got to be accessible. If someone would request a advertisement or application or description in an accessible format, you would be required to provide that. So it's good in those announcements to add some language that's saying if you need alternative formats or any kind of accommodation to apply for the job or interview or whatever, and give them the contact information so they can request that in advance. The job application, some things that I don't think are that much of a problem, but they're listed. You know, you can't ask, you know, have you ever been treated for the following, and then a big list of boxes to check for conditions you've been treated for. You know, treated for mental health, have you been hospitalized, are you taking any prescribed drugs? These are questions that aren't allowed basically because they may reveal the existence of a disability. So you want to stay away from asking that stuff. The job interview, basically the same things that apply to the applications applies to the interview. And again, this needs to be accessible. May need to provide auxiliary aids or services during this process. And that's why it's important to have language indicating that if they need any accommodations, to request those in advance. I know you may get caught sometimes somebody's showing up for a job interview with an interpreter. Somebody needs to pay for the interpreter and they're asking you to. You know, that's why you ask for that information in advance. Questions to avoid. One of the things that you may run across is somebody comes in that does have a visible disability. They're using a wheelchair, or they're missing a limb, or they're blind. Even though it's a visible disability and you can see that, you still can't ask about the nature or severity of the disability, you know, condition causing it, or or asking if they're going to need any additional treatment or special leave because of that disability. So you need to stick to just the ability of them to perform the essential functions of the job. And here's an example of that. Somebody comes in with a broken arm, which you can clearly see. You know, you can ask about, you know, how'd they break their arm, because that really doesn't focus on the disability, but you don't want to ask them, you know, how bad is the break? Is it going to heal properly? You know, are there going to be any, you know, long-lasting effects because of that? And basically you don't want to, again, because that may reveal the existence of a disability. Another example of that type of question is you can ask somebody how many days they missed last year at work, but you don't want to ask them how many sick days they missed, because that may tend to reveal a disability. Excuse me. And here's that example with the one arm situation. If an essential function of the job is to drive, you know, you don't want to ask them, you know, how their disability is going to affect their ability to drive, but you can ask them, you know, if they have a valid driver's license and if they can perform any, you know, special aspects, you know, of the job, you know, such as frequent long distance trips, and just ask them, can they do this with or without a reasonable accommodation? Another example of how you can get a lot of information in a question. This one says, you know, our regular work hours are 9 to 5, 5 days a week, and we expect employees in this job to work overtime, evenings and weekends for 6 weeks during the Christmas season and on certain holidays. You know, you get 1 week of vacation and can take 5 unpaid leave days per year. Can you meet these requirements with or without reasonable accommodation? This type of question, this type of question can, you know, open up and start that discussion about accommodations and what they might need to do the job. Now just a little bit about reasonable accommodations. Title I of the ADA covers employers with 15 or more employees. Provided you need to provide accommodations to them unless it would cause an undue hardship. They've kind of broke that down. And remember on that, the ADA covers 15 or more, but South Dakota law covers all employers. They break it down into categories about adjustments or modifications to the job application or interview process, for the work environment, or you may need to make some modifications, you know, that enables employees with a disability to enjoy equal benefits and privileges of employment as their counterparts. And what this is meaning is basically if you have a Christmas party or training or other off-site activities, it would apply to possibly spouses or family members or friends or whoever else might be attending those events. They might have a disability and you need to accommodate them also. Some of just examples of some accommodations: making facilities accessible, modifying work schedules, you know, obtaining or modifying equipment or devices, software, relocating or redistributing marginal job functions. Employers aren't required to do this for essential job functions, but they are for the marginal, and that's where it comes to your job descriptions. If you have the essential functions and marginal functions listed, it kind of tells you which ones you're required to provide an accommodation for, or which ones you can, give to another employee as an accommodation. Providing interpreters or qualified readers. Sometimes there's equipment that an employer, it's expensive equipment, and an employer's not required to provide it, but the accommodation would be to allowing the employee to provide that equipment. You need to keep remembering that all these accommodations are individualized, kind of a case-by-case basis. So you just need to use that interactive process and talk with the person and come up with a solution so that they can perform those essential functions of the job. And one of the excellent resources for this is the Job Accommodation Network. They've basically got a whole bunch of information on their website. They've got a searchable accommodation database. They've got an A to Z database that you can sort by disability or by topic or by limitation, and it'll just give you a long list of possible accommodations or accommodations that have been done for that specific job duty and that specific limitation. So they're really a good resource to look into. Or you can just give them a phone call and explain your situation, and they'll give you a bunch of resources and possible accommodations that you can provide. They did a study, and I don't have the actual statistic of what the cost of most accommodations are, but there's a lot of them that don't cost anything, and a lot of them are low cost. But the most frequent benefits to the workplace listed were that it allowed the company to retain a qualified employee, it increased employee productivity, and I think Kim alluded to that before, that sometimes you'll do an accommodation for a person with a disability, and that same accommodation will help all employees increase their productivity. And that eliminated the cost of retraining a new employee. And all these are what, and that Kim alluded to too, they increase or help the bottom line of the business. So it's not just the right thing to do, it'll help the business out by doing it. And that's basically what I had. I'm going to turn it back to Kim, and then we're ready for questions.
Well, this Ability for Hire is an outreach campaign that the South Dakota Folk Rehab has been working on for the almost a year now. And what the intent of the campaign is to provide the employers throughout the state of South Dakota just to promote the skills and abilities of people with disabilities, also provide technical assistance and resources to employers, and also dispel any myths or misperceptions around employing people with disabilities. Our website officially launched today, so please feel free to go in and look at the website link, which is abilityforhire.com. And then also there will be other materials that will be coming out in the near future as well. So this is a very exciting time for us. Well, that concludes our PowerPoint. We would like to provide you with our contact information, which as you can see on our slides. So if you have any questions, especially for employers or any businesses out there that has any questions or just interested in learning more, please feel free to contact me, where Steve Stewart is our rehabilitation engineer, and he's very helpful, is providing consultation for the ADA compliance. And anything else that you want to add, Steve, or assistant?
No, I don't think so, other than we keep referring to vocational rehabilitation. Basically, that is, in South Dakota, is the Division of Rehabilitation Services underneath Human Services. So that's who you would contact.
Well,
questions?
Well, very good. I thank Kimberly and Steve both for a fantastic presentation. And yes, we do have some questions that have come in, and you guys were very thorough. So we'll see if we get some additional ones as well. Before I get to the questions, we've provided 2 handouts for this presentation, a job interview questions PDF and a copy of the PowerPoint presentation PDF. Those should appear on the panel on the right side of everyone's screen. They will also be posted on the retailer's website, www.sdra.org, following this webinar. Kimberly and Steve, let me get to a couple of questions, and we'll see if we get others that come in. Did you say that a mental illness is considered a disability, and can you expand on that?
Yes, it would be considered a disability. You kind of got to go back to how it's affecting one of those major life activities. And so I guess I'm trying to think of some limitations with the mental illness that would apply to that, but it could definitely affect their ability to, you know, possibly interact with other employees, or a lot of times that's one of those that's controlled with medications, but you know, then the person starts feeling better, they stop taking their medications, they might have some issues there. But it definitely is a covered disability.
Well, Steve, let me ask you this question, and it's from one of those that submitted this question as well, and it may be one where a resource might be needed for an employer. The question basically involves, if I believe a current employee may have a mental illness, is this something I can discuss with them? And second part of that question they ask is, can I recommend that they get some kind of treatment? I realize this is a delicate question or series of questions to ask, but certainly would like to pose it to our experts and see what your thoughts might be on a resource for an employer as well as the employee.
Yeah, I think you can't really, it's hard to bring up the disability part of it, but if you see in any way it's affecting their ability to do the job, you know, you might approach them and say, you know, I see you've been having, you know, some problems by getting angry or blowing up with people over the phone or something. You know, this is one of your essential job functions. You know, what can we do to help correct that? I mean, you talk to them about the way that is affecting their ability to do the job, and then it kind of starts opening up, and if it comes up, then you can talk about it. But you just need to talk to them about ways they can change or things that they may need to do to perform that job.
Very good. And Kimberly, feel free to jump in if you have something to add as well.
I was just,
oh, go ahead.
I was going to say that, you know, a lot of times, you know, the Division of Rehabilitation Services could help, but the Division of Mental Health would be a contact for possible accommodations or resources for that. Or I bet if you would look on the Job Accommodation Network and you look under, you know, mental illness, it would give you a long list of not only possible accommodations, but there's a lot of resources listed for that too on that website.
And also additionally too, even if you were to contact Steve or myself, we may not have the answers, but we would be more than willing to sit down and just work with you one-on-one and just walk you through the process as well.
That's great, Kimberly, and I think that's exactly what a lot of our members are looking for, is that resource. Let me go to the next question. Are alcoholism and drug addiction considered disabilities?
What happens with that is you can't currently be using drugs, but if you are an alcoholic but have not been, been in recovery for 10 years, that's where potentially knowing that you may end up discriminating against somebody that would fit underneath that prong in the definition of regarded as having a disability. Maybe they're not currently using drugs, they were, but you treat them as they have a disability because of that when you find that out. But if they're currently using drugs, that is definitely, not covered.
Another question that just came in. An individual who uses a service dog has applied for a job with me, and I would like to hire them. However, one of my current employees is allergic to dogs. Can I restrict where the service dog can go in the workplace?
Yeah, that's come up quite a bit, and it's one of those deals that you just kind of got to work. If that person needs that dog to do their job, if you can somehow kind of split that up and say, the person that's allergic is going to stay in this area, don't take your service animal in there. And I can see where it could be they maybe need to go to that area to get supplies or to do whatever function, but maybe that's one of those that you could say, we're not going to require that person to do that. We'll have somebody else, go in and get those supplies or do that function. It's one of those things that you just kind of got to sit down with them and explain, but if the person's allergic to dogs, you could definitely say that you don't want to have those two in the same room at the same time. So scheduling that so they're not would be kind of the accommodation.
Yeah, and certainly I would think that cuts both ways for both the current employee as well as the prospective candidate. And obviously in a lot of smaller workplaces, that may not always work out, Steve, necessarily, as you're suggesting. I think there's probably, I'm not sure if there's a clear-cut answer to that, because it certainly seems like it, as I said, cuts both ways.
Yeah, it does. And one of the things you could look at is would having to restrict that service animal for whatever area, that could be something that by doing that would kind of fundamentally alter that program. That your normal areas, you've got two receptionists in the same area that they're working, and now one of them is allergic to the dog. Completely relocating or moving the reception area, it would be kind of fundamentally altering that. So it does cut both ways.
Let me go on to our next question. If I hire a person with a disability and it turns out that they are not able to perform the required job duties, do I need to change the job description or place them in a different job, or how should I handle that?
If they can't perform the essential functions of the job with or without a reasonable accommodation, basically you don't have, if it was somebody without a disability and it was the same kind of problems, not meeting the job requirements or not meeting the productivity or whatever, you wouldn't have to keep them. You don't have to do something for a person with a disability that you don't do for everybody else. And I may have kind of missed that. If you want to ask that again, maybe I...
Sure, let me repeat the question. If I hire a person with a disability and it turns out that they are not able to perform the required job duties, do I need to change the job description or place them in a different job, or how should I handle that?
Well, I would say you wouldn't need to change the job description unless the things that they're not able to perform are essentially marginal job functions versus essential. And the giving them a different job, you know, might be a reasonable accommodation, but you wouldn't have to create a new job or anything for them.
Okay. Regarding slides 8 and 9, if I would like someone to come in and help me figure out what I can do to make my business more accessible for workers who have disabilities, can one of these agencies help? I think you probably have to go back.
Yeah, I think so. Yep. There's, and you can call us to tell which ones. I know Dakota Link is good at doing job site assessments. You know, depending on what it is, if it's somebody with a visual impairment, you know, SBVI would be an excellent resource to contact. Or it's kind of like Kim had said, if you want to just call one of us first and ask us the question, we can definitely point you in the right direction or make that referral for you.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. So again, just please feel free to contact either myself or Steve, and we would be more than willing to walk you through the process step by step.
And we've got just a few more questions as well as a comment that somebody shared with us, but I would remind everybody, if you have any additional questions, please feel free to submit those to us in the remaining minutes that we have here with Kimberly and Steve. Next question, if a job applicant has a disability, how can I find out whether they need some type of accommodation if I hire them?
That goes right back to the questions where you ask, like the one question I said, you know, we're working 9 to 5 or 8 to 5, 5 days a week with, but you're expected to work overtime and all that. Can you perform these tasks or these job functions with or without an accommodation? I mean, if they say yes, they can, you know, you don't need to take it any further. Or if they say, well, yes, I can, but I may need some extra time off, you know, for some medical appointments. Then it kind of opens it up. But you kind of have to ask them the question. It's more detailed you can get regarding the job duties or job functions, and asking them if they can do that with or without a reasonable accommodation.
Next question here. Did you say some of the agencies mentioned can help with training for employees who have developmental disabilities?
Yes, that is absolutely correct. You know, there may, you know, it was mentioned that Division of, or both Rehab or SBVI or the Veterans Affairs or even the American Indian VR program, there may be at times where they will partner with the community support agency within those locations to where they partner together to provide individualized supports, whether it's a community or residential or employment, to work towards community integration. So absolutely, and there is a variety of services that these agencies can provide. If interested in learning more, either contact us or we can direct you to the appropriate agency.
Last question I have, and then we have a comment submitted. Can businesses combine the tax credit or only use once? Or only use one, excuse me.
Well, you know, there are some exceptions to some of those tax credit, and I don't want to provide you with the wrong answer. So again, you know, it would be best to, in the event that you're thinking about, you know, a modification to a work site or whatever need might be changed, is to best consult with your accountant or the IRS for further details.
I think on some of them I know you can combine them, because I know there's one that's a tax deduction that you can claim, and that would be for businesses that maybe are over that $1 million or more than 30 employees. But I know if you do qualify for that tax credit and you go up to that maximum 10,000, or I can't remember exactly what it was, I think it was 5,000 that you could get as a tax credit. If you use that, then you have more expenses, then you can use the additional as a tax deduction versus a straight, you know, credit. So I think it would be, there's numbers on the tax credit information. I could get you that information from the ADA site that have numbers for technical assistance, and those are IRS numbers that could answer that.
Yeah. Steve, I think that would be fantastic. And Kimberly, I know you mentioned as well, it's clearly probably a tax professional or CPA type question. If I'm an employer or a business, what's the best way to ask that question to my tax professional? What am I asking them to look for in terms of applicability of the tax credits? Is there a specific what I'm asking them?
The tax credit one, I could get the information. They could call me. I don't have it right in front of me, but I mean, there's a specific IRS form, like Form 620 or whatever it is, that goes along with a lot of these tax incentives and credits. And so that accountant or whoever, if they had that form, that would help them understand more specifically what it is.
Yeah, Stephen, I would say if you can get us that information as well, it might be something that we can share with all of our members in our newsletter. Let me wrap with this comment that was submitted. The Department of Veteran Affairs has another program not mentioned. It's called the Compensated Work Therapy, and assists disabled veterans find employment in the community. There are apparently 2 vocational rehabilitation specialists who can do job coaching and follow along services with the veteran and the employer. If there's folks that are interested in that, they can be reached at the Department of Veteran Affairs for this program at 605-333-6890. Again, that's 605-333-6890. Steve and Kimberly, any closing thoughts or comments?
The only comment I would have is that, you know, if you have any questions or anything, just give me a call or email, and we'd be more than happy to work with you.
Yep, absolutely, and we do appreciate everyone's time today.
Well, I want to thank both of you. It really was a fantastic webinar and a topic that I think is very important, particularly as employers have issues with workforce development and looking for workers, and just accommodating those that have a disability. We certainly appreciate the information, and we want to continue to share information with our members as this effort goes forward. If you have any additional questions, you can contact Kimberly and Steve at the South Dakota Division of Rehabilitation Services. They've shared their contact information with you there on the screen. Again, this webinar was recorded and will be available on SDRA's website on Wednesday. And just a reminder that we have several other webinars scheduled. For information about those programs and to sign up, please visit our website at www.sdra.org. Under the training tab, click on webinars and seminars. Again, our website is sdra.org. Again, Kimberly and Steve, thank you very much. And we want to thank everyone for participating in today's program. We hope you have a great day. Thank you.